Hi, my name is Dr. Gershwin Chana, and I'm Director of Biomedical Science at MX3 Diagnostics. Today, I want to tell you about our revolutionary hydration testing system that we've developed that is being adopted by many professional sports teams and athletes around the globe. So MX3 was formed about 4 to 5 years ago, really with the vision to bring rapid, convenient point-of-care testing for health and performance biomarkers to professional sports teams and athletes. What you can see here is our MX3 Lab Pro, which is the first handheld electrochemical device, as well as our hydration test strip in blue and our sweat sodium test strip in orange. So just to give you a little bit of background about MX3 Diagnostics as a company, we bring together PhD level expertise in things like electrochemistry, biomedical engineering, and microfluidics to enable rapid lab-grade testing for health and performance. This slide nicely illustrates some of the key organs involved in sports and performance, including the brain, lungs, heart, muscles, and eyes, and really just indicates that how critical optimal hydration is, with many of these key organs being more than 65% normal water content that's found in the body, and in many cases being above 70 or 80%. With regard to optimal hydration, these are the key physiological components that we know that are involved in optimal performance. These are strength and endurance, cognition, respiration, cardiac functioning, and in many cases, dehydration has been associated with an increased risk of soft tissue injury, as well as suboptimal recovery as well. So this just speaks to dehydration and how it can impact muscle performance. As little as 1 to 2% reduction in body mass loss can cause reduced muscular strength and performance, including dehydration reducing high intensity endurance activities as well. Now, in terms of hydration and fluid loss, replacing rehydrating with water alone is often insufficient to actually replace fluid lost. And so really understanding how much electrolytes an individual athlete is losing is key to being able to replenish the electrolytes as well as the fluid lost by that particular athlete. With regard to dehydration and cognition, as little as, again, 1 to 2% body mass loss can cause reduced mind-muscle connectivity, which is key for that on-field rapid decision-making required for optimal performance. It's also been shown to have an increased risk for concussion, as well as recovery from concussion and developing long-term cognitive impairment. And on the flip side, if you don't understand your electrolyte loss needs and you're just rehydrating with water, you can actually encounter something called exercise-associated hyponatremia, which is often seen in endurance events, particularly of those people who are salty sweaters. Now, in terms of tracking hydration, typically the gold standard has been plasma osmolarity. This is obviously very invasive, it's expensive, and it's not something that can be carried out routinely in the field. The other methods that are out there are body mass loss. Now, while new body mass changes can give you an accurate assessment of fluid loss, they're often inconvenient to implement, and they're also subject to day-to-day variation. Urine-specific gravity is something that has been adopted by many teams over the years in terms of hydration status monitoring, but it's rarely used correctly in terms of sample collection and interpretation. And by that, I mean, really urine-specific gravity has value, but only in the first morning context. So only when it's first morning USG and it's collected midstream. And this is more than 99%, what's not adopted by sports teams. Instead, they use it in a point check scenario, whereby it can be greatly influenced by things like acute fluid intake, whereby if someone consumes 1.5 liters of water, 30 minutes later they'll appear to be hydrated, but in fact there could be many liters of water down on their hydration itself. So it's really not accurate for tracking acute dehydration. So what we turned to was salivary osmolarity. Now, salivary osmolarity as a hydration status indicator has been around for many years. However, it has not been adopted as a routine way to assess hydration status, simply because you had to actually send a sample off to the laboratory for it to then be analyzed in a lab grade osmometer, which is a $20,000 piece of equipment. So what we've done is we've made the MX3 Lab Pro, which is a handheld electrochemical device, which will give you an equivalent measure of salivary osmolarity easily and conveniently in the field. Salivary osmolarity is the concentration of particles in saliva. It's non-invasive, and it relates to changes in body mass loss, as well as also changes in plasma osmolarity as well. This is our hydration testing system. It comprises our MX3 lab, which I've told you about, our hydration test strips, which have really been, there's been a lot of intellectual property put into those to enable these test strips to, consider many like variations in viscosity, and so the microfluidics have been optimized to be able to wick the different viscosities and different complexities you get with individual athletes. We have our MX3 dispenser, which is a really nice, touchless way to actually load test strips. All our test strips have been gamma irradiated, and they've been toxicity tested by an FDA accredited lab, so we know that they're safe for use with athletes. And then the data is collected all in our MX3 app and our portal, which is really a unique way to continuously hydration profile athletes, and being able to actually track that data over time and look over the season to identify athletes who may be significantly more vulnerable to dehydration effects than others. Now, this is a video on taking a hydration measurement. What I'll do here is I'll actually give you a demonstration of how to do this. So taking a measurement can be done one of two ways. It can be either via our app, or you can do it in local mode. So I will show you a local mode measurement here. So I'll just select local mode on the device. It will say insert a test strip right there. I will then offer the test strip to the device. It'll say take a sample, and then what you ask the athlete to do is just swallow all the saliva that's in their mouth, give some fresh saliva on the tip of their tongue, and it's just a quick tapping motion. And you can see that took less than 5 seconds. And then this is now doing the analytics, basically, which is about another 5 seconds. And it gives me a score, which is 42. It also has a very convenient way to then discard the test strip just by pressing the eject button there. So really it enables a contamination-free way of doing hydration testing. We've also made the hydration test strips actually a lot longer than they need to be to enable a nice physical distance from the test strip to the actual device itself, to also prevent cross-contamination. So with regard to our technical validation, this has been carried out independently by the US Air Force as well as by Monash University. And what you can see here is a series of 50+ saliva measurements that have been carried out with our system on the left versus that bigger, larger laboratory osmometer. Again, $20,000 piece of equipment. And what you can see here is the equivalence. So the like-for-like measures for the two systems is almost identical, with an R-squared of 0.945. So really, this gives us confidence in providing you with a very accurate salivary osmolarity value for using as a hydration status indicator. Physiologically, what we've done in terms of validating our hydration testing system, we've done a fluid restriction study in 90 athletes, demonstrating that if you measure salivary osmolarity before and after exercise, as well as nude body mass loss, you get a significant correlation between the increase in salivary osmolarity you see and changes in nude body mass loss. And that's what that table there is showing you. Interestingly, when we measured USG in those same time points, we don't see that relationship at all with nude body mass loss. And that wasn't surprising to us, because us and others also in the literature have shown, again, USG, when used to track acute active exercise-related dehydration, is not a good indicator. So this allowed us, from measuring about 3,000+ athletes, we were able to rest in their exercise. We have been able to establish these hydration categories you can see here on the left, but there's also a way to personalize hydration ranges for the individual athlete as well. And this is by actually working out their optimal hydration zone or baselining the athlete. And the way we do this is allow the athlete to become fully hydrated. And then we take a series of 6 measurements with our device to enable that to capture the salivary osmolarity variability when the athlete is fully hydrated. And this then you can see in the bottom left here with this score of 54, this then shows that optimal hydration zone for the athlete, really allowing them to prepare, measuring the athlete 3 to 4 hours before training. And if they're out of their zone, then you can actually take corrective action to get them back in zone. The other way to use the system is by looking at how dehydrated do they get while they're performing. So typically if we see the value increasing by 100% and going from like 54 to 116 in this example, then somewhere along the line, inadequate rehydration has not been possible and basically performance has been lost. We don't expect the athlete to be able to replace all fluid loss, but we expect rehydration to be sufficiently given so that basically performance can be maintained, especially in a training scenario. And then as you rehydrate an athlete after dehydration, after the salivary osmolarity increases, what you see is then that number tracking back down to a more hydrated range. So you can also use this to actually look at rehydration and recovery and to see when an athlete has actually consumed enough fluid to get back to their baseline, basically. And this is important because athletes don't want to be consuming fluid, obviously, late into the evening, where that can actually potentially disrupt their sleep, later on in the night, which is also key in terms of sleep for optimal performance. This is showing some team level data that we've gathered, and really over a period of 4 weeks, what you can see there is a team level hydration profile outlining the hydrated, the mildly dehydrated, moderately dehydrated, and severely dehydrated athletes, allowing a coach to identify those dehydrated athletes, take intervention, positive behavioral change in terms of asking the athletes to increase their hydration status. And really by the end of that 4-week period, you can see you've got that improved team hydration tracking. And this is really our philosophy in terms of hydration status monitoring. It's more of a positive reinforcement as opposed to a punitive system such as USG that's been also adopted by many teams. This is our sweat sodium profile. Now moving on to personalized electrolyte replacement. And really we have the unique thing about that we've developed out of the system is the test strips again, which are compatible with our MX3 Lab Pro. Otherwise we use a standard patch-based approach. So the patch that you can see there in that picture will be placed on the forearm of the athlete. They'll be asked to exercise at training level intensity for 30 to 60 minutes. And then the big innovation is we're able to give you the laboratory grade sweat sodium score by just tapping the test strips and using our electrochemical device in under 20 seconds. This gives you your sweat report and your sweat sodium score that you can see here. And that allows the coaches and the performance nutritionists to really understand whether a person is a low, moderate, high, or very high sweat sodium excreter, and how then to tailor their personalized electrolyte replacement. This slide, again, is just indicating the large variation that can be seen in sweat sodium. So you can have values from 250 milligrams per liter to 3,000 milligrams per liter, and really speaks to the critical need to get that data point for your athletes, basically for, to really maintain their fluid balance. This is a video now on how to take a sweat sodium test. And this will go through the steps on taking a sweat sodium test. And so these are the components that I mentioned to you before. The swab is used to clean down the arm and before the patch is being placed on. So the arm is cleaned down. That's allowed to dry, and then a patch is placed on, pressed down firmly. And this is a standard way that is used by many other sweat test providers as well. The athlete is asked to exercise at moderate to high intensity for 30 minutes or longer to get the sweat into the patch. Patch is removed, and you could do this with gloves as well if you wanted to avoid any minor contamination from the hands. That's put into a syringe, and then that's squeezed out basically into a tray. And again, this is a standard way that has been done by many. You could measure that then from the tray, or you could store it in a sample later on. And then it's just a quick tap, as you saw there, on the tray to actually get the sweat sodium score. We do a series of 3 measurements to give you a little bit more accuracy with regard to that sweat sodium test. And then a report can be made that can be actually sent around to the athletes. So in terms of technical validation of our sweat sodium test, this has been done by an independent triathlete company. The person we worked with here had done sweat sodium testing on over 3,000 plus athletes. And really what this is showing is a series of 30 athletes who were measured with our system versus that lab grade electrolyte analyzer. Again, much larger, more expensive piece of equipment, but it's showing that the values given by our system versus that electrolyte analyzer are pretty almost identical. The R squared is 0.993. So we know, again, we can give you the accuracy of that lab grade sweat sodium concentration. This is an interesting graph from one of our triathlete coaches based in Melbourne. On the right there, you can see a Melbourne-based training day that was done, and that's the pre. And then when they went to Thailand and did that same workout, what you can see is that increase in sweat sodium concentration, which then over a period of days tapers back down. So there's also an interesting effect of acclimation, and how do you account for changes in an athlete's electrolyte replacement needs when they change climates. On the left, you can see that shows you clearly the variability in that group of their sweat sodium scores. And really, we know other things can affect sweat sodium, like diet, exercise intensity, and fitness level. And the thing that differentiates our system is we're able to offer it at a much more cheaper price point with regard to the sweat sodium test. So typically, sweat sodium test providers are offering it between $100 to $150, whereas for 50 or 100 tests, we can offer those at like $25 or $20 per athlete, and that just enables a lot more high throughput testing of the athletes, or it just enables a lot more of an affordable way to actually sweat sodium profile teams. So how are we different from other sweat tests out there? Well, really, we're giving you that lab grade sweat sodium assessment through our electrochemical device. This accuracy is critical, as many of these patch-based systems, including ours, are trying to estimate whole body sweat sodium. So we're one of the most accurate methods out there in terms of doing that sweat sodium assessment from the arm. We like to adopt an active exercise approach compared to chemical induction, because we feel this better extrapolates to real exercise-related sodium needs for the athletes. And then, of course, paired with our salivary osmolarity measurements that give you that continuous way to track hydration, we're really providing a unique solution, which is encompassing both fluid loss and electrolyte replacement. This is just an overview slide showing you how the two tests come together. Our saliva test, looking at salivary osmolarity, our sweat sodium test, which with the data all gathered and centrally located in the portal, enabling teams to track and optimize their hydration status for their athletes. And I'd just like to briefly now talk about some customer use and testimonials. And this is just a few of our customers who are using it today. The Swedish national football team was one of the first teams that used our system, and they used it in their Euro 2020 qualifying campaign. They really use it in a sense of initially profiling the team, looking at player hydration and sweat sodium at the start of the season. And then during training or during camp, they can actually measure the athletes prior to breakfast, let's say, identify the dehydrated athletes, and they can action rehydration before their training, which may be in the afternoon, a few hours away. They also use it then as a recovery and rehydration analysis. So in the early evening, when they have education with the players, they can then also use it to identify athletes who haven't fully recovered or who are not rehydrating as effectively as other athletes. Now, we don't advocate this necessarily, but they've come to rely on our system also in an injury prevention context, and it's an accessory measurement that is often called for by the coaches, in addition to the physical signs and symptoms that are associated with fatigue at halftime. And Dale Reese is the main performance coordinator we've been working with there, and he's really a big advocate for our system. The San Francisco Giants are another team who have been using it for about the last 2 years. They do that initial profiling as well. And for them, the contact time with their athletes is less, but nevertheless, because our system is so convenient to use, they're able to still get many data points in terms of hydration for the players. And Saul Martinez, who's their major league sports scientist there, really thinks it's a quick, efficient way to test someone's hydration and display their score. And that's what makes it really unique. So quick, efficient, and displaying actionable advice. The UCLA Bruins is another team who uses our system. Larger team, 105 players. Kevin Heiberger, and prior to Kevin, Frank Woodrich, who used to be the director of performance. They use it in a slightly different context. They measure their athletes, the first team athletes, 24 to 36 hours before they actually compete. And then any of the athletes who are dehydrated, they will actually call them back in on game day to see how they've rehydrated and recovered, to make sure that they're optimally hydrated for the game. So they've really been big users of the system and gaining great benefit. And Kevin really feels it's another layer of protection to prevent, those soft tissue injuries that we talked about earlier on. So MX3 is a performance platform for the future. We have our hydration test and our sweat sodium test to date. We will also be releasing in the next 6 to 12 months electrolyte testing as well. So you can measure specific electrolytes such as magnesium and calcium. We will have a lactate testing strip coming out. So you can actually do a salivary lactate test, which correlates very closely with a plasma lactate test, but you can do it a lot more conveniently and easily. We have our ketone testing strip that will also be compatible with our system. And that allows more in the sense of endurance athletes who like to be on ketonergic diets for obviously longer lasting energy. And there's an interesting thing with pH and measuring athletes' pH saliva to ensure it doesn't get too acidic, because it's found that athletes have much more acidic pH, which can obviously cause erosion of their teeth. So just finally, some of our additional customers who are also using it to date. We're in a number of Major League Baseball teams as well as NBA. We're also in discussions with NFL teams. We have NHL teams also using the system as well. We're in about 30, 40 professional soccer teams in Europe. And we're also used in more extreme cases of, water tapering and water cutting by combat athletes in the UFC. The NCAA teams, rugby, the military use our system a lot. So the US Navy, the US Air Force, and the Army as well. And importantly, in Australia, where there's a lot of mining activity, our system is also utilized by these large companies like BHP and Rio Tinto in Western Australia, where they have large issues with regard to heat stress. And they really use our system to profile all their workers before they come in for a shift, to make sure that they're at least in the best place possible when they start their shift and working in temperatures of 140 degrees Fahrenheit, basically reflective heat. So I'll stop there. And if you have any questions, please feel to get in touch with us. If you'd like a quote or an invoice, please visit with our team, or visit our website. Thanks very much for your time.